Welcome, everybody, to Service and Sacrifice. It is Friday, April 24th. I'm Ryan Peterson. Thank you so much for joining us here on WTEN Plus. With us, as always, Dom Dominguez, Emil Baker. Dom, fresh off vacation.
Indeed.
If you've been watching, you notice that Jen Stiletto-Smith actually joined us as a guest, but then sat in for Dom. So we had Jen here the past 2 weeks in a row. But Dom is now back, refreshed.
Feeling great.
Feeling good?
Feeling great. Hope Jen did a great job.
Soaked in all that Florida sunshine.
But we missed you so much, Don.
I'm sure.
A couple of things I wanted to talk about here off the top as we do. We like to call it our Hot Topics segment, and then we'll mention the guests that will be joining us in just a little bit. There's these wonderful flights, the couple different programs locally. Are they just local, or this is a nationwide thing? I never am sure. But
I think the two that we have are local, but
it
is nationwide.
Right.
I think this happens in different states to honor our veterans.
So there are these flights. There's a couple here locally called the Patriot Flight. There's another one, the Leather Stocking Honor Flights, that take large groups of our veterans and fly them, provided all free of charge to them, down to D.C. for the day, and get to see the memorial that coincides with the war that they served in. And I think it's just fantastic because, as we've said before here, we're losing more and more of them every year. And for those that haven't been able to experience that, it's just a wonderful thing. Have either of you ever been on one of those flights or taken one of those trips?
I have never been on it, but when I see it on TV and I hear different veterans that go to it, come to the medical center, the first thing I think of is the closure, right? Like these veterans get to travel amongst their friends that served in very like wars. I believe they take everyone from World War II to Vietnam, I think right now, to these honor flights. But think about the closure that happens. Think about them visiting these memorials and just being able to close in on some of the services they did, that contributed to those different conflicts. And I believe they get to bring someone with them too. Mm-hmm. So think about the bridge and gap between the communication of saying, "Hey, Grandpa, I didn't know you did this." Like how wonderful that is.
And Emil, I've been had the privilege of visiting the Vietnam Memorial on multiple occasions now, and it still astounds me to this day to see actual veterans who are seeing it for the first time and finding names of men that they served with, and how emotional it is for them to see that name there on that wall.
I've seen actually family members of deceased military people who have seen the wall for the first time and noted that recognition that the family member got, and that's gut-wrenching with a good way. I think one of the things that Dom mentioned is when they are actually in this transport mode, that they can have a family member and somebody who's disabled. It's very difficult for them to get the energy and to last for that whole day of adventure. So having somebody there that you love and trust makes a big difference.
Right, because we often see some of the veterans that are on these trips are in a wheelchair.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's just fantastic. And I know the one recently, and I think they do it with most of them, but they give them that water cannon send-off as the planes taxiing
Albany Airport
out.
does a great job of sending
really
the honor
cool.
they give these men and women that went over there. But yeah, it's definitely moving for sure.
Yep.
We have and speaking of museums and honoring and recognizing, a very special guest that will be joining us in just a little bit. Major General Joseph Talutom of the United States Army will be joining us to talk about veterans from the global war on terrorism, Dom, of which you are one, Indeed. And his involvement with the New York State Military Museum and how the museum is now working to make sure that this era of veterans get the recognition that they deserve.
Yeah. It's huge, too, because when you think of the museum is located in Saratoga, but when you think of the museum and we think about Saratoga, it's health, history horses, right?
Yeah.
We all know that the horse piece of Saratoga is we have it down pat. We have the Belmont races again, and the races are always there. The health piece is all taken care of with the amount of spas that Saratoga has and the water wells and all that stuff. But the history portion of it, we tend to forget. We have the architectural structure of the old Boston kind of look at Saratoga Springs, but we forget about the history of Saratoga. Saratoga was built from a battlefield. You know, we built this country out of Saratoga. So we really have to focus on the history portion of it, and the Military Museum there is a part of that, and to teach our children, our community, and to really reinforce what our veterans did. That is just priceless, and we have to maintain that. So I'm really glad we're bringing Major General Talutom in and really talking about the New York State Military Museum.
Well, I'm looking forward to that conversation. It is coming up in just a couple minutes here. We're going to take a quick break here on Service and Sacrifice. When we come back, Major General Joseph Talutom will be joining us here in studio to talk all about it. You're watching WTEN Plus. And welcome back to Service and Sacrifice, everybody, on this Friday, April the 24th. Joining us now, very special guest, Major General Joseph Talutom of the U.S. Army, now retired. General, thank you so much for coming in. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. I'm pleasure to be here.
Nice of you to join us. There's lots to get to with you. I could read off your list of accomplishments here, but most notably, sir, you commanded the 42nd Infantry Division, Task Force Liberty during Operation Iraqi Freedom 3. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
And what was happening at that time? What year was that, and what was going on?
Well, the reason they call it Iraqi 3 is it was the third rotation in. You know, that between Iraq and Afghanistan, that's the way we worked our force generations. We did rotations in every year. So it was a constant moving of troops. So we were the third rotation in pretty early on. It's 2004-05 was our time slot.
And of course, we're talking about the global war on terrorism and the world now as we know it post September 11th, 2001. And when we're talking about the global war on terrorism, we're talking about service members from all branches, our coalition partners. So how was it that this joint effort kind of shaped your mission and the U.S.'s mission going forward after September 11th?
Well, that's the way the U.S. fights. We fight joint almost exclusively. So we always have, whether it's 2 services or 3 or all the services, that's the way we go in to do our work. We also always have our agency fellows, partners like State Department, CIA, and more. And then you have civilian organizations that are in there, which they were in Iraq big time. Doctors Without Borders and organizations like that, USAID. So we are, as a team, that's the way we get to accomplish the mission. A lot of moving parts, very complex. You need all those people to kind of get that work done.
You know, you enlisted, and correct me if I'm wrong, enlisted with the New York Army National Guard in 1965.
That is correct.
How have things changed? And I know they have tremendously since then. What did you see in that time as far as our military goes, and how things change for better or for the worse?
Well, yeah, that's a great question because I have seen it all in that period of time. I can relate to EMO. I can relate to DOM. So when I first got in, pre-college actually, we had a Vietnam going on, and then it was a draft army. But then, of course, the big change came, in 1972 when we went to a volunteer force, and that really started to change the way the military service was, especially the Army, with regards to its professionalism and so on and so forth. Of course, it was the Cold War, and that's what we were training for. In fact, pretty much right up to the time we had a 9/11 event, we were still working asymmetric warfare, which is a little different than, what kind of wars we were used to in World War II and in Korea. But we were still focused on Europe. We were still focused on the Balkans and so on and so forth. But 9/11 changed it, and that really made a difference.
When we talk about our veterans, General, since that time, so from 9/11 until now, is it true, do you think, a lot of them are feeling overlooked? And what would you have to say to them?
Well, I would say your service mattered. Let's just put that right out there. You were ready, you were available, and you served when called. That's what all we can ask for. A standing army, a reserve component, came together to fulfill this mission. And it was a complex mission, and it was very different. Every era of war has its own characteristics. The characteristics of the service members are very much the same. Very much loyal, dedication to duty, selfless service, personal courage. All those things are things that our soldiers and sailors, airmen, and Marines exhibit. The difference in the GWAT soldier had to be very adaptable to a very complex set of mission sets. So I would give that, that term adaptability, that's a key. And also resilience. The resilience because of the length of the conflict, the fact that there were multiple rotations back and forth. In fact, an interesting statistics that I picked up when I got into working with the museum on this project, there's no way to really nail down how many served Iraq, Afghanistan, but the estimate got put out there as 3 million deployments. And of the 3 million deployments, 1.9 of those deployments, 1.9 million, were multiple.
Yeah.
So that meant that 43% of the soldiers and airmen and so on and so forth that went more than once. So to go over that period of time, to put your family through that kind of, experience, that's a tough one. So.
And you got one of them sitting to your right here, Dom. What's your reaction to hear the General talk about that?
The gears are turning, General, and guys, the gears are turning. But the one thing I realize, and we see this in the hospital, is World War II veterans, 1 out of every 5 Americans served in World War II. When we talk about GWAT, 1 out of 100 Americans served in Iraq or Afghanistan. That says a lot. That's a big deal. Which is why the rotations were so long, which is why multiple troops were deploying. What do you think, Emma?
I think much has changed in how the dynamics of staffing the military and meeting the quotas and the requirements. And I think that to go a second time requires a lot of inner strength because you've been there once, you've been in combat, and then you have to go again. But again, a lot of them had different duties and different focuses that they had with each of their deployments. So I'm sure there was energy and excitement that was generated in those deployments.
Yeah, that's a big one. That was definitely peculiar to this war. The fact that you came home, and are you really home? Because you know that you're going back into a training cycle that says, okay, now we're getting ready to go through the phases of another deployment. And so your family has to endure that, and I give them tremendous credit. I always will, being a big part of what was accomplished in Iraq and Afghanistan for sure.
I have you hold those thoughts. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about your involvement with the Military Museum here in New York State and how it's helping this generation of veterans and helping to solidify their service and make sure everybody doesn't forget about what they accomplished as well. You're watching Service and Sacrifice here on WTN Plus, and we're back right after a quick break. Welcome back to Service and Sacrifice this week for April the 24th. As you saw earlier, we're joined by Major General Joseph Talutom of the U.S. Army, retired, joining us today. General, we're going to talk a little bit now about your involvement as a trustee of the Friends of the New York State Military Museum and how you're working to preserve the legacy, particularly of these veterans from the global war on terrorism. And this is something you got involved with exactly when?
I got involved with the museum in July of 2025. I'm honored to have joined the board there. I've been retired for a while, and I've done a lot of nonprofit work. I've been on several boards, and I've done some consulting and so on and so forth. But I really wanted to take this on and be part of this effort because they were going to move out and recognize this post 9/11 generation. And having been part of it myself and having seen firsthand the service and sacrifice of these men and women, I feel I need to help cement that legacy and provide recognition and honor for these folks. So, being on the board, I was appointed as the Global War on Terror Committee Chairman. We have a special committee to establish some initiatives to support the museum's efforts to, put programs out there for this. So, the Friends of the New York State Military Museum is a nonprofit organization that provides funding for museum programs. We established 5 initiatives, very, very strong and prominent 5 initiatives. The first being a stationary exhibit that will be at the Saratoga New York State Military Museum that is underway right now and will be completed by September. This is the 25th anniversary of 9/11. That exhibit is going to be up and going, and people are going to be able to come in there and see a variety of exhibits that relate to New York Global War on Terror veterans. Our second big initiative is a memorial, and we're working very hard on that. The memorial is going to be either on the grounds of the museum or someplace very close to the museum, where we will honor the fallen from these events, and also, to describe, what unfolded post 9/11 for these men and women and their families. The third is to do a mobile exhibit because we want to do this. We want to get this out statewide, so we want to engage the entire state. So we will take artifacts, and we will take audiovisual, and we will provide this mobile exhibit at events and ceremonies that will be held across the state at their request.
Fantastic.
So along with that, the last 2 initiatives will be a statewide oral history program. Now, the museum already has an oral history program, and anybody can come in and talk about their experiences. But not everyone's going to make the trek up here to the Capital District. So we will provide an oral history program and, waltz it out there to people throughout the state and get their story down for their legacy. And finally, we will establish a lecture series in coordination. We have an education committee on the board, and we will establish a lecture series related to global war on terror topics. So those are our 5 initiatives, and we're raising money. We're doing very well, and we have a website. Hopefully, people will go. It's the Friends at New York State Military Museum.com, And you can see us there, and you can see the progress. We have a progress report on there and how we're doing on these initiatives.
Awesome.
And you can donate online to help us help us do this.
And the museum is located exactly where?
It's on, I think it's 68.
61 Lake Avenue,
61
Saratoga
Lake Ave,
Springs.
right here in Alton.
61. Didn't have the number. 61 Lake Avenue.
And that's Saratoga Springs?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yep.
And they have some other, see in the video here, the other artifacts as well that are there for everybody to see are phenomenal. They have quite the collection, it seems.
Oh, it's the heritage of New York State military history. So you'll go in there and you'll start with the Revolution, and it'll move you right through all of New York's and New York citizens' contributions to various aspects of military history in New York. It's a very strong museum with a lot of interesting artifacts, and it's getting better all the time. And by the way, we're going to have a big addition put on this museum. It's going to start construction next year, 2027. By 28, we're going to have a beautiful venue there to do more programming and
Excellent.
have more social events and engagement of our veteran community, and also to bring our community leaders together, et cetera, for support.
Some plans in the works for the big 250 celebration as well?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
No, that's well underway.
Yeah,
So
sure.
that's in another lane. I just sit and listen to what all those folks are doing, but there's a lot going on for that.
I love it. Major General Joseph Talutom, thank you so much for joining us here on Service and Sacrifice. It was a joy to talk to you, and I hope everybody that's watching at home got something out of this as well, and that you pay a visit to the State Military Museum up there in Saratoga Springs. We'll provide all the information as well when this gets posted, how you can donate and take advantage. General,
Thank you,
thank you
Ryan.
so much.
Thank you for what you do
Hopefully-
for Service and Sacrifice
I appreciate
podcast.
that. Thank you. No, this has been an absolute joy, and I hope you can come back and join us again sometime.
I certainly hope so.
All right. We're going to take a break right now. We're back with Service and Sacrifice here on WTN Plus. Welcome back once again, everybody, to Service and Sacrifice. I'm Ryan Peterson. Thanks for joining us here on WTN Plus. We just had a wonderful conversation with Major General Joseph Talutom, the United States Army. Dom, thank you for bringing him to my attention and getting him in here. That was a wonderful conversation, especially when we're talking about this, really what is the latest era of veterans.
Yeah, the important thing to take out of what Major General Talutom and what the museum brings to the table, the important thing to bring out of that, for me, is family and friends, right? Family and friends adds to the healing and reflection. So a lot of our veterans that serve, whether it's, that museum goes all the way back to the Revolutionary War to today's wars, but a lot of our veterans struggle with talking about their service with their family members. And these museums they're a great way to bridge that gap, right? When a veteran brings their grandson, son, daughter, spouse to these museums to kind of look at it, it's a way for their spouse or their loved ones to say, "Hey, Grandpa, look at this uniform. Did you wear this uniform?" And you could say yes. Or when they see the tanks and the vehicles and everything they have in this museum, it's a way to communicate that to your family members and really to talk about it. And that brings closure, that brings healing, it brings reflection to your service for your country. So it's great. And the friends piece of it is what we see in the hospital too, it's a place where veterans gather. So when you see that old man with the World War I hat or the Vietnam hat that I always see, it's a way to bond with your friends and make new friends, men and women that understand what you went through. And that is a wonderful thing. And then ultimately educating our communities, right?
Yeah.
We can't let this history fall. We talk about, when I was going through school, you only learned about so many wars and all, but this museum has everything you think of. And it's important for our communities to understand what we went through, how we can go beyond, these wars, so we don't make some of the same mistakes. But just honoring the veterans within our communities, how important that is. And Saratoga, like I said, is filled with history. We need to do better work at really getting the word out about our history.
And there's a lot coming up with the 250 celebration as well, all over the place. What do you think it is, and both of you here, you talk about how veterans have a hard time talking about their service, talking about their time in the military. Why do you think that is? Emma, let me start with you. Why is it so hard for some of our veterans to talk about it?
I'll speak to Vietnam vets, and one of the things is we hid our service. We didn't talk about it. We were hated, and really that wasn't something we could easily bring up. But I'm also going to mention my mom was a nurse in World War II. My dad was in the Army, and they didn't talk about their service. They didn't talk about what they experienced. And to go to a museum is going to educate me. I hear that today kids in grade schools don't know much about the Vietnam War, even that it's not a deeply taught subject other than dates and what happened. As an overview, and I think this type of thing would help open that up and get them to think and understand. And I think it opens up for the Vietnam veterans too to see this type of thing and somebody looking at it and thinking, hey, they're appreciating what we did.
Yeah, and it's all generational, you know. Like with me coming back, it's just hard to open up because you're bringing those thoughts back in, you know. And I know with a lot of therapies that works with the troops coming back now is exposure therapy. It's like, hey, you got to keep bringing that up. You got to understand what happened. You have to have that third view of what happened. But it's hard for vets. And then there's other veterans too, because 9/11 was so significant. For those veterans that did deploy and didn't do much, they don't want to talk about that too because they felt like they should do more. Mm-hmm. And that's something we forget. That's something we don't talk about. But I want everyone to know, like, everyone that served did enough. They did their part, but it is tough. It's either they don't want to talk about the bad experiences. Some don't want to talk about that they didn't do enough. And it's really a tough case, these wars. And, yeah, it's – being in the United States is hard sometimes, and being a veteran's even harder. So,
I love to hear the general talk about, though, them going out and taking oral histories from these veterans, right, and hopefully turning that into some sort of exhibit, or at least making it part of the mobile exhibit that they're raising money for and want to get off the ground. So I've been to some museums in the past where they have these terrific exhibits where you hear these people in their own words. And I think that can be extremely powerful.
And it's growing, too. I know at the medical center, our medical center, the VA Medical Center in Albany, we have something that's called Voices of Veterans, Voices of Our Veterans. And we do the same thing because, I mean, how many people can tell me the names of their great-grandparents? I can't, you know. So we have to maintain this history so we could show our generations what the past has completed and what they've done. So museum is a great place to record your history. The VA Medical Center is a great place. And for anyone, any veteran that wants to talk about their history at the VA Medical Center, please contact me. We do have a program called Voices of Our Veterans. Myself and another gentleman run that program. So it's important to really keep that, record these histories.
And if you're interested in helping the New York State Military Museum out, I know the general was talking about them raising funds and trying to get the money raised for that mobile exhibit. If you watch our program on our YouTube channel, the WTEN channel on YouTube, I'm going to get that information. I'll provide a link right there for you to both the museum and the fundraising efforts. If that's something you would like to help contribute to, that would be wonderful. As always, I would remind you, if you have any questions, if you are a veteran, if you're a loved one, a caregiver taking care of a veteran in your life, you have questions about benefits, services, anything else you can think of, let us know.
Yeah,
Got these two gentlemen right here. We will always get an answer for you. Email me directly at rpeterson@news10.com. But that's going to do it for this episode of Service and Sacrifice here on WTN Plus. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you back here next week.